Right, so I have no messages from StreamYard tonight, which is always helpful. Let's see if I can find everyone on my phone, and then I'll be able to see a bit more about what's going on, which is always helpful. And we'll just wait for the clock to tick round to, that will be 6 o'clock, and then we'll be hopefully vaguely sorted. I might even find an apron, because that's always generally globally good move. I think we've got the noise that turned off, so we shouldn't have to there we are, share that, and then let's just pop that into that one as well. There we are. Whoops. There we are. Excellent. Oh, and let me move this over, and then we might be able to see what's going. Hello, Juliana. Welcome. Right, let me just get rid of that. Post that. There we are, and then we can see what we're doing. It's always helpful. Let's just pop that up there. Hopefully not, so it doesn't go flying around. And let's find an apron, because otherwise, well, we know what will happen. I will have paint all down a top. Maybe a top that's getting altogether too big for me, but that's also beside the point. There we are. Let's just mop that over. That's better. That's better. Let's just move that down a little bit, and then we can get rid of that light off there. And I can sit down, and there we are. It's just all a bit of a fiddle. I have to have the light. It's beautifully sunny at the moment in the UK. The heavens have opened for a big chunk of the day, which is never a great place to be. But now it is okay. Let me just grab just a few brushes. Am I organised? Of course I'm organised. I know exactly what I'm doing. Not maybe possibly. There we are. We'll even treat ourselves to some new brushes for tonight. Whoever knew? There we are. Let's get rid of those. That's nice. Good evening, Renee. So, has anyone worked out what my cryptic title refers to? Oh, it's just 6 o'clock. So, I don't know, but the minute I saw Whispering Woods, I had and the shoes and houses. There we are. Let's just move that around. A childhood nursery rhyme sprang to mind, which was called "There was an old woman who lived in a show. She had so many children, she didn't know what to do." Can I remember the rest of it? Of course I can't remember the rest of it. But that has been going over and over and over in my brain. And so I decided I would get it out of my brain and onto a make. And I've got a huge whack of moulds. So this one is from our house. So one of the previous moulds, and we're going to be using the tree stems and this beautiful leaf front. We have from Whispering Woods this one, and we're going to use the mushrooms, the house, and the leaves. We have the pumpkins. These are beautiful from that mould, but we're going to use the little ones. It's the joy of having lots of pieces in a mould. And then from the fairies, I'm not too sure whether I'd use the fairies or not, but we're going to use the acorns and this border that I've actually broken into two. So that's always helpful. Good evening, Dee. I think you might be watching it on my page rather than on Pentart, so I might not see any more comments from you. Good evening, Renee. Hello, Sandorm. So There we are. Oh, so I have just a wooden board. It's a shaped wooden board from Pentart, but any wooden board will work, whether it's shaped or not. And because quite a lot of this rice paper that I've chosen is beautiful, is pale, I'd quite like the true colour to be showing through. So that's what we're going to do. And that means I need some gesso on here to to help me have a true colour. And this is just a little bit of water on there because the primer paste from Pentart is really quite thick, and I love it because it's economical to use, but also get rid of the rubbish. It's economical to use, and it also means that I can use it for texture, for wood effects, and also for stenciling with. So it means that you don't need lots of everything. Bună seara, Philomena, thank you. Good evening, Barbara. Thank you for joining us this evening. So we're just going to have a layer of white gesso over here. It'll help seal the board, which is also a good move. Having a little bit of water will help spread this a little bit more easily. The paste is thick intentionally. It's called a primer paste for a reason. If you want a thin primer, then I could have just as easily used the acrylic primer from Pentart, which is thinner, and but it is only usable really then as a primer, whereas the primer paste can be used for lots of different things. So we'll just give this a goodly wash over with the white gesso. It will help seal the board. Add a layer of white. Yes, you can see that there is definitely a difference where I've added the white, and it's a step that I would encourage you to do. And unless you want a more vintage style, in which case feel free to ignore that suggestion and just do your own thing for that more vintage style effect. The rules, for want of a better term, are there to help us. They're not there to constrain us, and they're not there to make our life all fit a single thing. So if you want a softer look or a more yellowed base, then go straight onto the wood. Obviously, it depends on the colour of the wood as to what will show through. And this one, although it's a nice balsary type wood and a soft colour, I do still want to add a little bit more to it. I have used the same primer to cover all of my resin pieces, and though there isn't just one of them. Good evening, Isabella. Thank you for joining us this evening. Hello, Connie. Welcome. I've said hello to Philomena, hopefully in reasonable Italian. I apologise if it wasn't. I've said hello to Barbara, and good evening, Judith. Welcome. So there we are. So the license for Pentart for the next 2 days. Annie, I think, is on tomorrow. Annie does lots of nature-inspired pieces with lots of moss and faux florals, and she has titled hers an autumn door knocker. So for those of you, excuse me, that are not aware of what a door knocker is, I think it's a translation from Hungarian into English, and it essentially is a wreath, and she always does something incredible. And then Audie, I think that's how you say her name, I could be completely wrong. Anyway, she is on Thursday with media inks, which are a type of alcohol ink, and I don't think they get used very often. I have a whole supply of them, and I often use them in resins to colour the resins. So it'll be interesting to see what she's up to, and I'm sure I will be watching that on Thursday and learning lots, because we can always learn from fellow creators, even if they don't speak in our first language. Good evening, Fatima. Welcome, my darling. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. So I've had lovely conversations with Sylvie from the Pantart family early on in the week. I hope you have also seen the promotion for some of the new products that are in preparation. They look to be fine artist materials, and I'm no fine artist. Craft person, good at using things, great with the hobby materials, absolutely. So you'll be delighted to know that I won't be introducing those materials because I have no experience at painting fine art pieces or really using oil paints. But I am looking forward to seeing what can be done with them, and of course learning about those new products, which I think the adverts from Real suggest will be available at the end of this month, which is always good. So is that getting dry? Of course that's getting dry. It's always helpful, isn't it? Yay! Not quite dry enough for me to add another layer of it. Good evening, Sheila. Welcome. Welcome, welcome. There we are. So let's just pop that over there. So that is now our wood piece that has been covered with some white primer paste. So that's good. And then I have, because I'm going to use for the background of my piece, a rice paper from Stamperia Whispering Woods collection. I am using the decoupage varnish and glue in white. White in matte even, because that's the surface, the preparation I prefer. But of course you could use this a shiny one if you want. I do have another one of the decoupage glue and varnishes on my desk, which we will come to later. So let's just give this a goodly layer of the varnish and glue. Does what it says on the tin. It will it will stick my rice paper to my board, and then I can use it as a sealer over the top. And I'm definitely putting a reasonably good layer of this on because I want to be able to slide my rice paper to get it into place, and a good layer that's not too tacky will allow me to do that much more freely than if I'm skinny and it all sinks in. So there we are. Let's just pop that there, and I'm going to stand up. Good evening, Liz. Welcome, welcome, welcome. The lovely Liz Wheeler is up in Morecambe. I trust that the weather up there today has not been too vile. It's never quite guaranteed up on the northwest coast, quite as what it's going to be. Now, this board has that tiny little bit exposed at the top. It's very inconsiderate, so I'm just going to deliberately scruffle that edge so it's not so obvious, and then we'll fill the gap in with another piece. Good, typical, isn't it? There we are. Let me just grab a wet paintbrush, and then I can break that off a little bit at the top, and then we'll fill the gap in. So it's easier to fill gaps, and disguise edges and patching in if you don't have a straight line, she says. There we are. So let's just, and that's wet, better wet. So let's just do that. I've got a whole mountain of excess over here. So let's just take that and even out that edge a little bit. There we are. can pop that onto there with a bit more glue. Didn't really want that wet. There we are. And pop that onto there. Let's just get rid of that sharp edge there. And it just will blend in just that little bit better than a hard line. And now let's just add a layer of the varnish over the top of this. Then we can pop it down onto the floor. Ground floor level crafting, always helpful. There's never enough room, is there? And then we can move on to our moulded pieces. There we are. A nice layer, because then the brush will float over the top. If you try working with a really thin layer, then actually all that will happen is that you risk pulling up the surface of your rice paper, whereas actually if you just use a nice amount of glue, it has its own slip, and therefore you're less likely to damage your rice paper. There we are. That means I'm able, again, because I put a good layer underneath, to just push out some of the air bubbles that I can see under there, and make sure that that is glued down nicely. There we are. So let's just come back over here. A good friend of mine said, you know, particularly if you're just antiquing things, add a layer, let it dry, and add a second layer. But hopefully by going back and forth over the whole piece a couple of times, I can avoid that, and that will work. So that brush can go in there, and we can lid that. Thank you. Hi B, and hi Caroline. Yeah, I'm not surprised that the rain was actually horizontal. When it came down here, it really came down. Currently it's beautifully sunny with nice, with nice blue skies, which is always helpful. So there is our base, and I'm not proposing doing anything really complicated with it. I did think about adding some stenciling, and I might do that with some of the leaves, but that surface needs to be dry before I do that. And I haven't got any crackle in sight today. I know what is going wrong with me. No crackle on a Make by Me. Anyway, there we are. My pumpkin house from last week has been claimed by my personal trainer for his lovely girlfriend, so that has gone to a new home, which is always lovely. There we are. And then we can have a little see what we're going to do. And I think we might well be having some custom colouring for some of these pieces. So let's get out things in logical order, because logical order is sometimes helpful, isn't it? So does anyone recognise where that comes from? So this is from Woodland Grove. Actually, I thought would work quite nicely. It's all colour palette wise, it's a sister collection, although they are a little different. The frog is shared between them, and then these pieces are from mould with the with leaves in, and they are from Owl House collection. Hence my mould addiction. And we have a boot that might also need to have a little bit of brown added to it. So let's just pop those over there for the moment, and then let's just have a little play with some colours. I don't want them all to be the same, so that is light brown. It's an acrylic paint mat. There we are. Oh, she says this is compact powder, which I normally use for skin, and I'm not intending doing any skin colouring today, but it will help soften that colour on some of these pieces. I'll pop a little bit of that onto there, lid that nicely. And then I also have some vintage brown as well. And I'll just grab a little palette knife to pop that out of there onto here. There we are. And we might just, whilst the going is good, give this a little squirt of water, because these are water-based acrylics, so they dry out in the sun. This one has been open for 2 or 3 years, so it's doing really quite well. But it's always worth, if you open a pot and it has gone a little thick, just spritzing in some water along the way to help with keeping it hydrated. So let us take a nice, maybe we won't take that one, maybe we'll take this one. So let's just start with our house from in the trees from Woodland Forest, Woodland Grove, and then we can go from there. Let's pick up some of that, so we'll have a mixture of colours onto here. Definitely I might need to add some water onto there. There we are. Add 3 times more than you needed, but hey ho, hey ho, it will help blend it all in. And by mixing our colours, of course, we then end up with some areas that are a little bit more lifelike, because everything isn't the same colour, is it, in nature? So there we are. So that's the plan for this. We might add a different colour for the roof, but we'll tackle that. Well, I might tackle it next. There we are. We'll add some of that and add some of this, and then we can mix up our colours, get some colour variation on our pieces so it doesn't all look flat. There we are. Make sure we've done the edges. There. And let's just do that roof whilst the going is good. And I'm going to add another brown. I know it's helpful, I think, to have lots of different things. Good evening, B. Hello, Katerina. Welcome. So this is, I think this will be red brown. There we are. So lots of different browns, but that's okay. The whole purpose of this is to have things that look as if they are reasonably individual. So let's just take that red brown and do that roof in the red brown. You can obviously refer back to the original papers or images online for for these for your color choice, or you can use your own imagination and pick a color palette that will work for you. The joy of creating for yourself is that you don't have to be fixed by rules, do you? There we are. So let's just do that. There we are. And that can sit to dry. She says, as I can see bits that I've missed. So let's just take these branches. A lot of these aren't going to be visible. The reason I've chosen to use these is actually because they all work as props for paper cut elements from the collection, which is also helpful. There we are. There we are, right. So we're going to do a slightly different technique with that. Whilst that is wet, we're just going to have a little wipe back of this. There we are. So softens the colour, adds some variation. I'm going to need to be a lot more careful with this one because A, it's dried a bit more, and B, I don't want it to mix in with the others, but it really does help add some variety and some shading really naturally without very much effort. And for those of you that saw the sample that I had for the for TV with the pumpkin, then that is those leaves were painted with a flat colour of paint and then just wiped back and then highlighted with some dry brushing to add in the colour. So you don't, you don't need to be overly precious about your pieces. There we are. So we'll just add that. That white back will work quite nicely, and it's not, it really isn't so difficult. Let's just move that leaf out of the way. I don't want brown leaves. I'm thinking autumnal colours for those rather than that. There we are. I could grab some more paint out, but hey ho, why bother when we're nearly there? So there we are. I don't want that white there though. So there we are. So we've got all of the depth and the detail and the interest. And because I've wiped those back, they're not then going to take a long time to dry, are they? So I'm going to take some of this compact powder actually, but I'm wanting a more tan effect brush, a brown boot. So let's just take some red clay. Yeah, that's red clay, and we're going to mix in with it some of the light brown, and then we'll get a better boot colour, I think. There we are. I don't want it as dark as that, but I do want it to have, there we are, that's better. There we are. But as I say, you can do the boot any colour you want, because it doesn't have to be a set size, does it? I think that's still, there we are. And of course it's all make-believe anyway, so it really doesn't matter, does it? There we are. Let's just pop that into there. Keep the windows on our boot, house, shoe, call it what you want. There we are. I know that the bottom of my boot is going to be partially covered, so I don't need to be overly precious about how I paint that in a different colour, because it's the sole of the boot. I could get a black out if I wanted to, but actually for the purposes of what I'm going to do, it won't matter. Oh, I wasn't meant to go over that door, so we'll have to get that a good dry before we can paint the door a different colour, but that's also okay, because acrylic paints, when they're dry, will layer over each other with opacity, so that's always helpful, isn't it, to have? And there we are. Let's just go around that window, and then let's just pick up some of this, pop that into here. We'll merge it in. There we are. This sort of soft mixing of our colours is just what I use to work, and when it's dry we can add some extra details into that, so that's good. And let's stick with that red brown for the roof, because I think that will work quite nicely, and we can come and give these a little bit of a chance to dry whilst we do some other pieces, and then we'll come back to adding the detail in to our piece, because sometimes you just have to let things dry before you can move on. There we are. But that, yeah, so lots of different shades of brown, from the vintage brown to chocolate to light brown to red clay. So, and a bit of self mixing with some compact powder, and that can sit there for the moment. Excellent. So let's just give my brush a little wriggle in there, and then let's think about some leaves. Well, because we've got the red clay out, so the red clay will work, I think, as a starting point for a colour palette for our leaves. Do have some green out, so there we are. Let me see if I've got all of the leaves I wanted. There's some leaves on that, and the pump. We'll pop those little pieces down. There we go. What else do we need? Well, we've got lots of bits, but that will do to start with, I think. All right, now then, let's move those out of the way. So I think that's the bright yellow that is too big. So this is ochre. So let's just add a little bit of ochre onto there. She said, note, I said a little bit, and I've chucked on about 25 tons more than we absolutely need. And we've got some that reddy brown. So that's okay. And I'm just going to pick up a flat brush. That's not so very flat, but will be easier for these and quicker. So let's just pick up that red clay, a little bit of the ochre. Don't need those stuck together. I might just squirt a little bit of green onto here. So this is olive green, which again is one of my go-to colours. There we are. That clearly is about to. Looks like that might be about to be suitable for a bin, but that's okay. We can hope that that will last us for the rest of this. So we'll mix in some green, so as if our leaves are on the turn. There we are. We'll mix it all up, because by colour mixing like this, we'll get lots of nice colour variation, and we have a very autumnal looking leaf. There we are. Add in a bit more yellow. Let's just add in a bit of that green. There we are. None of this is going to take a silly amount of time. It's just as well, because we've got 25 tons of them to go. No, we haven't, but we do have, and we will have some that need a little bit more care with the painting. And notice I'm really not precious about going between my colours. These are here again as rafts for positioning, so a lot of it will not necessarily be so obvious. There we are. Let's just add a bit more green into there, and we'll add a little bit of the red. There we are. See. So there's loads and loads of these on different leaves on the assorted moulds, which is lovely. They are Diddy. They're great fillers. So and they've been put in to use the space, I think, more than anything else. So that's quite handy. There we are. Some orange. So that red clay is softer, I think, than a bright orange. And let's just put a bit more green into there. And yeah, if your brush is still 30, you'll end up with a single colour, but that's also okay. Let me just clean my hands, because that's also quite helpful. I definitely do want some of this and a tree to be more green. Have I got more green in here of the olive variety, or do I have to go and get a new pot out? That would be very inconsiderate, but actually I think I am going to have to grab a different pot. Who would have known? I might have thought about it. There we are. There we are. So let's just grab some of this olive, pop a bit more of that there for reasons that will become clear. in a minute. I don't want it all to be brown. Now on screen they're looking a bit monotone, but they really are not. There we are. So let's just take this. So this I'm going to, so this I think is meant to be a branch from a tree, but I'm actually using it almost as a tall bush. There we are. I'll cover that, because why not? So who's counting the numbers of different molds I use? I know at the beginning I had 4 out, but actually I have used more than those 4, because I dug in a pile of resins that have been cast away and found other bits. So I know how many different molds I've used, but maybe we can have a guess about it, just to add some interest. I haven't quite shown you all of the different molds yet. That can go, you see, all the bits that you can't get at because you're sitting on a live. There we are. And let's just do the same trick with this that I did with the stalks. I'm just going to wipe it back. So one layer of paint, a little bit of a wipe over, and we've got lots of colour variation. No effort required whatsoever. And if you were working with a ceramic powder or the decor powders or the concretes, then it would absorb in. Definitely more than 3, Sheila. Definitely more than 3. I can see some brown on there that needs covering. So let me just pop that in. A little bit of green won't be a problem. It will just look a bit like moss. There we are. If I manage now to cover all of that lot. And so this is the last piece that I hadn't shown you at all before I set you off guessing how many molds that I've used. This is from a collection from, I think, December, maybe November last year. So I like it, molds are tools, and you look at them, you think, they're quite expensive. Am I going to use them? But they are tools, and you can, they will mix and match, and they can be used year after year after year, and for lots of projects. So for me, that they're a good investment. So let's just take this off. Again, it's that same wipe technique, and it's given me lots of detail on there. And let me just add, if our patience is let's just break that new brush in. There we are. Just add a little bit of brown onto the tree. So right now then, let's, ooh, she says, that's not what you wanted to do. Let's just wash that, and then we can turn this around, get rid of some of this, pop that over there. We might have to get a brush out, heat gun out in a minute. There we are. Get more pieces. We might not be doing some of those other bits. We might, on the other hand. So we now have some more leaves. So this mold has got lots of leaves and lots of tiny acorns. So it might be a little bit of a challenge for me. I definitely don't. But hey ho, we're up for a challenge. Why not? Why not? So there's 2 pieces. These 2 pieces actually form one long border, and I've just snapped it into two because it worked better for me, for the piece that I'm doing, for it not to be all the whole length. I wanted to separate it out a little bit. So just because a mould is one piece does not mean that that's how you have to use it. Right, okay, let me just pick up that leaf in there. See, it's nothing like setting yourself a challenge, is there? Painting the little part, the caps on those on the mushrooms might be an interest, but hey ho. Yeah, yeah, that is another acorn. There we are. We'll pick those and we'll use those in slightly different colours. There we are. So hopefully we won't be forever, I don't think. We better not be, otherwise my daughter, who's cooking tea tonight, will be very unhappy with me. But hey ho, that's life, isn't it? There we are. There's two pieces of that broken in half. Have we quite got there? No, we haven't got quite. We haven't quite got there, but that's okay. So we'll get lots of colour variation really simply by having a brush that we're not overly precious about and not overly worried about the colours mixing. It just adds to a more natural appearance, I think, overall, by not stressing. And yeah, if you really wanted to, you could pick out each colour separately, each leaf separately. And if I wasn't on a live, I might be up for the challenge. But as we are on a live, I'm not up for the challenge of painting it all separately, because we would be, with the numbers of moulds that we all know I decide to use to build my compositions, we'd just be here forever, wouldn't we? Of course we would. And being here forever is maybe not what we want to be. There we are. We will need to get some ivory out in a minute, or a very light beige for the acorn bits, and then a brown for the caps. But we'll worry about that when we get them. And again, it's going to be a question of letting these pieces dry before we attempt to add the extra details. There we are. Cool. So that's those pieces. Now then, they're acorns without, but these acorns have got leaves with them. Very inconsiderate it is too, but hey ho. There we are. So we'll just do that. There we are. And I might leave. Shall I leave the little mushrooms and the pumpkins? I'll be getting fed up with me painting. Yeah. But we need to do a bit more painting over here. So let's finish these for the moment, because we can always go back and add in. So I just need some of these pieces to be dry. So that's finished, those are finished. Now I can have some wax. This definitely, the two houses definitely need some extra work. The tree is okay. So let's just get this dry, and then we can start adding some extras into here. Look at the state of my hands. I just bear with, babies, because I really cannot be doing with it in those colours for the next bit, because if I pick up ivory paint, it's not going to be ivory for very long, is it? Of course it's not. Of course it's not. I think for the time being that one is now dry enough. Let me just grab something to clean my hands with. Hello Blanche, welcome my darling. Thank you for joining us this evening. I trust that you are well and that there are no great problems for you at the moment in Mexico. I haven't seen anything untoward in the news, so let's just pop that hot mess over there for the moment. We will need those two out. Let's pop that over there. And then we'll concentrate on these. And we're going to have the red out anyway, so, and the ivory out. So these, let's just pick that up. So that's a little butterfly. Because it wouldn't be me without lots of moulds, would it? It just wouldn't. Right. Clean the revolting hands, because that seems like a prudent move. So I have some chalky paint here. And let's just pick a nice brush. Hopefully it's a nice brush. Yes, nice soft brush. Don't need that. It's quite so soft. So this is just cream white. Paint. So let's just paint our house white or creamy white. There we are. We're trying to avoid using lots of distressing techniques. We might use some dry brushing, but wasn't going to be using lots. There we are. So now we have a house that's white. Let's just use this cream for the mushroom top on here. There we are. And then let's just sort out those windows where we've got what we don't want. There we are. Pop that onto there. We'll be doing a bit of a tidy up of that, and that door can go there. There we are. And we might just need a little bit of brown just to touch that edge up where I've popped it where I don't want it. But that's okay. Right. There we are. So let's just pop that onto there. There's some mushrooms that come in the mould with the pumpkins. There we are. Okay, so let's just pick. I don't want the. There we are. So let's just take these and give them all a bit of a blast, because we'll struggle if we don't. Okay, might need a smaller brush, but let's go for it. So, so I don't want the acorns to be really creamy, nor do I want them to be really brown. So there we are. We'll just soften that colour, she says. So I've picked up some of the decor, the off-white, and a little bit of the brown, and I've mixed it to make a beige shade, because that's going to work better, I think, for my acorns. There we are. Let's make sure we're on the screen. That's always helpful, isn't it? Of course it is. Right. So that might prove a bit of a challenge. Pop that into there, and then we can tidy up that with the top colour. So you paint your base layers first, or the depths first, then you can add in over the top, and it's just then becomes easier to neaten things up by doing that. And there we are. I'll pop that onto there. Right, I will definitely need a smaller brush at this point. That brush is horrid. It's too firm. So let's just pick up a different brush. That's at least softer. That's going to move nicely. There we are. Let's just paint that one. And we've got another acorn there. It's very inconsistent. There's lots of acorns on these. Did I think about this when I was prepping? Yeah, I did, and then decided that it was worth it for the finished result. So, yeah, that's just the way the way the cookie crumbles, isn't it? Yeah. When you're creating. So that yellow was still a little bit wet, but that's okay. We can pop that into there. As I've said many times before, look at the colours that you've got. You don't necessarily have to have every colour in the sun, because a little bit of colour mixing will often just do the trick for you. You can soften colours with whites, you can darken them with blacks, you can make them more vintage by adding brown. You can age them by adding a little bit of the yellow, ochre. And you can mix your own shades and tones quite happily. You just have to have the confidence that you can do it, rather than, as I say, buying every colour known to man. Because much as I might have lots of the colours, I mean, there are huge numbers of colours in the Pentart range of colours. I often end up colour mixing to get the shade that I actually want, and I think that's just real life, isn't it? That's what you do. There we are. Let's just do that. Let's just give that a little bit of a dry, and then let's pick up some of that brown. There we are. And paint into our acorn caps. Yeah, that looks okay. We might need a little bit of water into there, but that's okay. So just a question of being patient at this point. And so my intention is not to use masses of aging techniques tonight. You'll be glad to know, because otherwise we might just be here for an awful lot longer. There we are. So I'm just picking up brown off my palette, having popped everything into there. Paper plates can be your best friend at this stage, and it does minimize pot contamination. I know that might seem a little bit like me being ridiculous, because we all know I don't generally worry about pot contamination, but sometimes it's best to pile out what you want and then just there we are, turn it around all corners, all edges. There we are. There's lots of details in these, but as I say, we're going to Been relatively simple tonight. Well, she says, I might change my mind yet because we all know what I'm like. But it'll take a wee while to varnish and then antique all of this lot. So, which you could do. And if you're going to, I would absolutely suggest that you do varnish if you're going to. Antique. No, I sometimes don't, but it's good practice too, that's for certain. There we are. I think there's another one in there. Yep, a little cap. These are all textured, but I'm not going to worry about or stress about that for the time being. There we are. Because as I say, I don't really think we wish to be here at 10 o'clock this evening when I might otherwise finish it if I varnished everything first. Yeah. And hopefully it shows that you don't need to be overly precious. I'm just darkening that bit off. It's a suggestion, isn't it, of what's there. There we are. And I'm sure that there are people who can paint moulds better than me, but it really depends on what works for you, doesn't it? I think at the end of the day, we're all unique in the way that we see things and the way that we choose to create. Whoops, didn't intend to do that, but that's okay. Let's just lift some of that off where I don't particularly want it on there. There we are. So we've now got our acorns with their little fairy hats on the top. There we are. Right. So let's just take some of this green. I'm just going to come over the top of that. That's quite thick, so let's just thin that paint down a little bit, make it flow for me. There we are. This one I think might need to end up being antiques, and if I'm going to antique one, I might as well antique it all. There we are. And let's just choose a different colour for the door, because why not? This is Bourdon, which is one of my favourite reds, because why not? Why not? Let's just add that into there and give this a blast. And we might end up being very naughty and putting some antiquing paste onto this one to soften it all through. So let's just have a red door here on this house. And a little bit of that. There we are. Okay. Let's get rid of that green, that red off there. And this might actually ultimately need a little bit of some texture in here, as if it might be moss on the walls. There we are. Okay, cool. And that red is too dark for the mushrooms. That'll be another one going in the bin. I'll make it when a plan comes together. There we are. These are still wet on the legs, but on the stalks, but that's okay. As long as I don't get red on my other fingers, I can paint in the tops of these. And we can give all of this lot a good blast. There we are. So a nice set of brushes as opposed to my manky ones. It's always helpful. There we are. And let's just use that ochre for our butterfly, which then we can age that, or we can dry brush it and add in some extra. There we are. Okay, so let's get rid of those paints. Pop that over there, get rid of that to the bin. Might regret that. No, I won't. Right, so let's just give these lid all of these and pull in all of these pieces, and then decide what we're going to do. They're staying like that, they're staying like that. And then let's just give these all a good blast dry, and then we can worry about the next steps. So next week I need to turn my main lights on, I think, before I go live. Because it's definitely getting there, isn't it? They can go over there instead of being aged. They're already antiqued enough. I will grab some wax and pop that on there in a minute. That needs a bit of dry brushing. Mushrooms will get rooted on inside too, because if I water them now, then it won't work when I want to move them around. Let's just get these pieces dry and then break the rules. So those will need to be properly dry before I break the rules. And just press it all. Yeah, they're getting there. Right, let's pop that there. So let us just grab some antique paste. Those are going to be waxed. Those are going to be that can stay there. Let's just grab a manky brush with this and a paper towel or a wet wipe. Oh, she says, don't pull the computer to pieces. So that's quite wet, and it will change these up. And if I might end up doing the rest of it, but there we are. There. I will end up doing the rest of it, won't I? You know I will. There we are. It just works. It just does. Time and time again, it just works. And I know last time I used the metallic glaceurs, didn't I, for aging? But this just does work. We're going to add some more to some of the others. I can't help it, ladies. I'm really sorry. I cannot lie. It's an effect that I love, and for me, it just works. There we are. And it's a disguiser. It's a, you know, there's very little on this brush at the moment because it came out of a pot that was full of white spirit. It's just going to work better for me. There we are. They're just going to look more antiqued, more aged, softer. There we are. Right. We will need some dry brushing onto the shoe. So let's just pop those all over there. Pop that over there. Just going to take a heat gun to that and blast that. Whilst that's drying, just bear with, ladies. On in the main room, so hopefully you'll be able to see better what's going on. Always difficult at this time of the year. You know what to do for the best. Let's just dry that off a little bit. That can sit there with that on there for the moment. And I will take my panel, which is still wet, because it's not hot in here now, is it? Of course it's not. Let's just get this dry as well. And then I'll concentrate on the edges. I'll be able to sand it. Because it's that top edge that needs a sand. The rest does not. So I would prefer not to destroy it in the process. So nice dry edge, and it will peel down and come off for you really easily. If it's wet or damp, then it doesn't come off so nicely. There we are. Good. Excellent. And I'll stick that on the floor with that dryer blowing at that. Just a minute. Let's just pick up a little bit of sponge and so this is just a piece of cut and dry fat sponge. It's just going to let me pick up just some of that detail on there. There we are. It was a bit firmer than I wanted, but that's okay. We'll just add some of this in. There we are. That can go on there. That can go there. Let's lid some of this. Thank you, Isabel. Do not worry. I've just done lots of painting of pieces. This is very much a craft piece, not tonight, rather than, she says, looking for her wipes to clear the mess. And Let's just pop that lot up there, out of harm's way for the moment, because we will be needing them shortly. But if I pop everything onto that, we'll have a pickle, won't we? And I might add some wax when things are properly dry. Right, let's get rid of that. Pop that there, pick that up. So, how are we going to make this into our shoe home? So, from the Junk Journals collection, we have, this is the Junk Journal pad. We have a shoe. We're going to partly cover this. We are going, of course, going to be doing lots of layering. So I'm just going to get rid of the white edge from there. And we're going to, because that is paper, we're just going to grab our craft glue. And I know that I'm wanting to put these two here. It will work. Let's just pop some of this into here. There we are. Our shoe can go there. We'll just pop that down. That will grab reasonably quickly, and that's cool. We now have to grab some of our matte medium, my preferred go-to glue, but you use the glossy if that's what you prefer. And we are going to pop our shoe that we have painted. Sorry for bashing my camera, because that will make you all feel horrible. Onto there. Now then, that is the starting point for that one. And I know that I want my tree, or aka bush, to sit there, and my tree to sit here. Okay, so now we have on the floor some moss in autumnal colours. So let us just pop into here some bits of moss. They'll stick in that glue quite happily. Might add some yellow. I've got a different shade in here. So this is just a pack of mixed colours, which will work quite nicely. Okay. To start with. Okay. So what else have we got lurking over here? So I have some more pieces from my ephemera collection, from my junk journal collection. So some of these are paper pieces, and some of them are definitely, I think these have all come actually from the junk journal collection. This is a really quite nice thick quality card, and that makes quite a big difference. You can see I can really be quite brutal with this. So that's going to go in there, but I want something to lift it up a little bit. So I'm going to pop that piece onto there, right though. And we're just going to build a scene in the way that you've seen me build scenes on many occasions. So there we are. We're going to have that one there. And we're going to have that one there. I'm going to be able to move these around a little bit. And I'm just going to pop some gel medium onto this partly because it's going to allow me to have a little bit of extra depth, and will help. So I'm just going to pop this onto there and pop it down, and I've got my extra bit of twig that I want to look as if it's coming off that branch. It's there. So that's why I've picked those pieces the way that I have, and we're just going to have a clean up of that extra gel medium. That'll be why that brush is feeling awful, because I use it for gluing. There we are. Okay, and we're going to take this one from, I think, which comes from the Woodland Grove, and we're going to pop that one up there. So we're filling our space. Okay. Also from the junk journal piece is this leaf, and I'm just literally going to manhandle it and give it a little bit of shape and texture and pop it so it's coming off the page and in. So I just now need a blob of gel medium for some depth, and a little bit down there to catch it in place. I could be using glue, ordinary glue, and then I can trim off what I don't want when it's all set in place, if that makes sense. Let's just turn that so it actually is sitting nicely, and that looks like it's all coming in off our pieces. So I'm going to pop that just off to the side. I mentioned at the beginning that I was going to use another product from the decoupage glue and varnish and glue set. So this is the glitter one. It will do when it's finished, sponge, I think. And this will add a little bit of shimmer. So I could have used a glitter glue, because, you know, or a glitter pen if that's what I had. But the glue, this glue and varnish is packed full. So I'm just going to add to these pieces. This is why I thought shoe. There was one old woman who lives in a shoe, and it will add a little bit of rigidity to that. But when it's dry, I will also get a very subtle sparkle, because you can't really have angel wings without a bit of sparkle, can you? I don't know. Maybe you can. And I can layer this and add some extra layers if I want more sparkle. There we are. So glitter sparkle onto there. It will just be subtle, and that's fine for someone who doesn't really do lots of sparkle, because I really don't, do I? But that's why I titled the piece, well, I originally titled it "There Was an Old Woman Who Lived in a Shoe." So I'm going to pop her onto there. Let me just give her a bit of a shape so she sits on there reasonably nicely. And let's just grab some of this, pop it onto there. It'll flatten out, so don't worry. And she is then going to sit on there as if she's flying, because why not? Why not? And the old woman who lived in the shoe had so many children she didn't know what to do. So let's get the right pieces. That is going to sit into there. And that is going to sit into there. I have a title, The Forest Calls. And because I want this to be shaped in place, Just going to pop that up there. Comme ça. With the glue at those ends. I'm going to pop my little butterfly onto there. And the smaller of those acorns is going to sit on there. And then we're going to start adding. So we're going to stick an extra leaf under there. And an extra leaf under there. And I'm going to get rid of that blob because it's going to irritate. And we're going to pop an extra leaf on the end of there along with the little one, because why not? And that can go onto there. We're going to take a bit more of that gel medium and we're going to tuck that into there. And then we're going to have some fallen leaves tucked in to here. So let's just pop. I'm going to pop my little girl now onto there. So she's sitting amongst all of this. There we are. Clearly need a blob more glue, and that's fine. Let me just grab another palette knife and fill that hole. I could be using some extra cardboard, but as I haven't got that cut, we're just going to stick the extra glue into there. So she's sitting amongst those. We have, again, from the die cuts, and I could add some rub-ons, but I don't think I'm going to. So I'm going to add that onto there. So I'm just building my story, if that makes any sense to anyone in my slightly mad world. Did I have it that way? Did I have it that way? I think I must have had it that way. There we are. No, I didn't. I had it that way. There we are. That can go into there. That can go onto there. There we are. Can go into that. Let's just now take these remnant pieces. What have I done with my that's what I've done with my mushrooms. You see, you just have to have all these bits, don't you? So there we are. So I'm going to pop a little mushroom into there. A little mushroom in front of that house. A little mushroom can go into there. We're going to pop some more acorns there. We've got another acorn that can go into there. We've got another leaf. Now you know why I have so many pieces all prepped and out and ready. Where's that wet brush? There we are. Let's just get rid of those white blobs before they make a mess as it dries. That might end up with a bit of sparkle because that clearly had extra on it. And I think we're going to pop that one into there. Underneath there. We do definitely still need a little bit of a clean up of some of these areas. Thank you, Isabel. I rather think so. I think it's quite an involved make, isn't it? I'm not going to hide from the fact that it's not a 5-minute make. But actually, I think it's worked out quite nicely. I had a vision. I can add in some extra moss, or I can pop in some art stones if I want, when it's dry, if I want to fill in any other gaps that irritate me. There we are. And the last bit that I want to do, this is not open. This is the Pentart contour pen. So these are lines you need when you first get them to break the seal on the inside. Just be careful. I'm using a knife, so go on, click it in so it's there. Yeah. And they all splurge. Don't be surprised at that. We'll pop the cap on. Okay. And then they have a separate cap for sealing it in between uses. And I always squash out the extra. So now I can just add some dots on my mushrooms. I'm using the bits that are on the molds, and I am adding to it. Because I think it works really nicely from here. Come on, stick in place. That's exactly why I said I should leave that until it was dry, and then I can add this onto the top of the house. There we are. So, ladies and gentlemen, if there's any gentlemen watching, here is our make from our live this evening, the shoe house. Inspired by the English tale, there was an old woman who lived in a shoe. She had so many children, she didn't know what to do. I have to say, I'm rather pleased with how it's all come together. I never know completely until I've finished whether it's going to fully work. I've always got an idea that it will, but time will tell. So, Sheila, in answer to your question, how many molds have I used? This one is from Woodland Grove. This is the shoe molds. That's 2. The acorns come from a 3rd mold. This comes from a 4th mold from our house, and this one comes from Alter Ego. So that's 5 different molds that I've used to make this piece. I know, extravagant, possibly, worth it to my mind, absolutely. So, ladies, I hope to see you online next week. I have a more functional piece rather than a purely decorative piece planned for next week. I will, as ever, once this is fully dried, no doubt mess with it and then decide eventually to take some photographs, and I will pop it up online for you. So we've used relatively simple techniques with just painting and then wiping back, a little bit of dry brushing, some contour pen, and a little bit of magic with the glitter glue on the wings to give them a bit of stability and also just add that special sparkle. So, ladies, please take care of yourselves. Be kind to yourself above everyone else and everyone else around you. And I will see you next week. Bye.